Weirding Way Media.
Welcome to episode 96 of the Filmumentaries podcast. This is Jamie Benning talking to you here from my house in London, England. Thanks for joining me again, or perhaps for the first time. Either way, I appreciate you being here. And if you enjoy it, please do spread the word. I hope you enjoyed my archival interview episode in January 2024. One with producer Robert Watts and the other with actor Garrick Hagon. Well, now we're back onto some more recent interviews. I can tell you I've been busy lining these up, ready for 2024. So, for the first, it's a pretty big one. Well, it's a very big one. Thanks to the lovely folks at ILM, I was given the chance to interview director Gareth Edwards, along with his effects crew on The Creator. I've been trying to get Gareth on via a mutual friend of ours, but given that Gareth is currently doing press about the nominations the film has received, it was perfect timing. So you'll hear my conversation with Gareth along with VFX supervisors from ILM, Jay Cooper, Ian Comley, Charmain Chan, Andrew Roberts and Jay Cooper, as well as special effects supervisor Neil Corbould. There's also an exclusive video version of the podcast on the Filmumentaries YouTube channel with some behind the scenes clips from ILM. So maybe watch that because you can see all of us talking, you can see who's talking. I paint some of those interviews with some of the VFX breakdown clips that ILM kindly provided. So if you can, maybe have a listen to this, and if you enjoy it, head over to the YouTube channel and watch it again. So we talk about Gareth's unique shooting techniques that enabled, the large scope on a relatively low budget, and also about the famous use of the prosumer camera that they shot the film on. How the collaboration between on-set crew and VFX teams is crucial for achieving a seamless integration of those practical and digital elements. We talk about anchoring VFX work to practical elements to enhance the realism and believability. How real-world locations can also provide inspiration and authenticity to the film's design. And how the future of filmmaking with VFX lies in finding innovative ways to combine practical and digital techniques and finding the best tools to make the pipeline more efficient. This film was shot quite differently. Gareth's approach was very different, very bold approach really, and the VFX pipelines had to be changed to kind of cope with that. So we talk about that as well in some depth. And then we finish by talking about some of the award recognition and what it means to them. So here's my conversation with Gareth, Andrew, Jay, Charmain, Ian and Neil, and I'll be back at the end for a bit more jabbering on. Gareth, how did you manage to pitch this idea of shooting a big budget movie, but the smallest part of the budget on the kind of the shooting, the in-camera stuff, and then saving the rest of the budget for the VFX? A very non-traditional approach.
That was the plan. It went a little bit left field of that because of this thing called the pandemic. It wasn't quite straightforward as staying guerrilla the entire time because we had to have the pandemic police sometimes on set, obviously. But yeah, no, basically I always felt doing previous films, I got very lucky. I did a very low budget guerrilla film as my first movie. It got me in the position of doing two massive, amazing opportunities in Hollywood. And I always felt there's like a more sweet spot to be had where, and you have to kind of, the problem is if you just go for like, okay, I'm going to do a mid-budget movie, you become a kind of film that has the aspirations of being a blockbuster, but has none of the budget and gets crippled very quickly. Or it's trying to be creative and artistic like an independent film, but it has to deliver this big box office, so it can't even do that. So you can get completely trapped and not be either. And so it felt like the most simplest way to explain it to everyone was, let's go guerrilla, let's go really indie with the shoot. And therefore, if you get the crew down to a certain size, it's cheaper to fly anywhere in the world than it is to build a set. And so suddenly you can cherry pick all the greatest locations in the entire world for every single scene. And then you've got this problem of like, let's not build anything because we can't carry that stuff around with us. We'll have this big buffer, in theory, for post-production. So it was a bit like taking the safety net people normally have as backup during a movie and go making the film with that. And our safety net was like the majority of the budget for post.
And did you ever consider using, like studio or those other techniques that have kind of emerged in the last few years, like the volume? Or was it always your intention to go in that sort of guerrilla style that you described?
We did use the stagecraft, which everyone knows more commonly as that thing they used on The Mandalorian. And so we did use a bit of that for two environments at the end of the movie that were in space because it was impossible to find the real world equivalent. And green screen, I spent my background was visual effects, so I spent most of my career dealing with green screen. And I just think green screen is essentially taking a problem and just giving it to someone else. In production, it's often seen as solving a problem. Like, if we paint this green, then we did it. We can tick that box. We can move on to the next scene. And it makes it hell on earth for the people in post that then have to figure out what the hell everything is. They're basically saying, we don't want to make the film. You can make it at ILM later. And so that to me is like just off the table now in terms of an approach, unless you really, really know specifically what you want and you're not, there are versions of it that work, but for this one, it really felt like we're not going to go there and like, let's get a piece of footage for absolutely every VFX shot in the film and let's try and make it look as good as possible so that when you then replace elements of it, it's still a strong image from the start, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. And I've heard lots of talk, of course, about the the prosumer camera that you used and how that freed you up and how it was lightweight, you could operate and things like that. But I'm interested to know, what knock-on effect does that have on the VFX departments? Because it's not the traditional kind of pipeline where, I guess on-set VFX, Andrew, you're used to having some sort of control over the environment, but here you've got Gareth, operating himself. He's finding moments of improvisation. He's finding, he's reacting to those moments. What kind of challenges does that pose for you?
That framing that you would typically have, or I know that is the background, that's the space that's going to be behind Alfie and Joshua or Haroon. Didn't really have that because Gareth would have these long takes where he's moving around and he's having them reset and he's hunting for that perfect angle to really capture that connection or that moment. So for me, it was sort of trying to observe where Gareth was moving so that when he finished a take, he would hand the FX3 to me and I would maybe shoot a tile to try and provide VFX with a background. Also doing a round shot, or what we call a virtual background, where I end up just shooting 360 degrees, sort of tilting up and down and trying to create just a very high resolution sphere to be able to provide somewhat of material for background reconstruction and then shooting HDRIs. But when John Knoll spoke to me about joining the creator, he did say, like, you're not going to be able to get everything. And you do need to sort of let go, be present, be available for Gareth, but also, don't get in his way. Like, we'll be able to, support you. It's going to be a little bit of a trust fall that, you'll just try and identify the main thing to get at any given scene. And that the rest of the team trust that they'll be able to pick up the rest of it. So there were some moments of anxiety when I'd see Gareth wandering around, and from a close-up, suddenly we're a two-shot, and now we're looking the opposite direction. But it was just about trying to grab as much material as I could to hand off to the post team.
And what knock-on effect does that have to you then, Jay and Ian and Charmain?
Yeah, I was just going to say 90% of filmmaking on this movie don't get in Garrett's way. I think maybe 95%. Well, one thing I wanted to sort of go back to quickly is the camera, and you would have thought that there would have been more problems like that there was going to throw up some huge issue about working on something that's prosumer, but I'd open up to everybody else. I felt like it was actually not that huge a deal. Once we got over the problems of the specific lens, and we as part of our process, we have to profile every lens that we use, so we're able to remove the distortion and match the artifacts of it. We got back to sort of traditional filmmaking. It could have just as easily been an Arri Alexa or a traditional film back. So I think that was something that was really exciting and a little bit surprising that there wasn't a huge problem when it came to that. So I mean, it was not something that we were like, oh man, we're gonna be fighting this the whole way through the show.
Something probably to point out is we weren't in any way trying to use a prosumer camera to sort of at the end go, ta-da, we used a prosumer camera on a big Hollywood blockbuster. Yeah. It was like, honestly, if you inverted the price tags and the Arri was $4,000 and the FX3 was $80,000, we would have paid $80,000 for the FX3. It was so light, it could shoot at 12,800 ISO, which suddenly meant we could use available light, and all our lighting equipment got way smaller and more battery operated. And those two things alone, and the color science had just suddenly gotten good on those cameras, because you have to mess around a lot in post to get the look, to look like film and everything else. But some cameras, no matter how much you mess around, you can't get there. But they'd use the same sort of basically the same technology inside as they used in the Venice on the FX3, pretty much. So it felt very professional in that sense.
Yeah, and we were getting 4K images off of that camera, so it's not even like there's a resolution component that was very different. I mean, listen, there's always a camera that has more bells and whistles or more resolution, but in terms of what we needed and giving Gareth the flexibility he wanted on set, it was a huge win.
Definitely. I mean, we're so used to Arri Alexa footage, kind of maybe super pristine, but in a way, this had beautiful imperfections, and I think that just went hand in hand with the very naturalistic scenes, the intimate moments, lady sifting rice through her fingers, and just those little day-to-day moments, and there was something quite intimate, I think, about that sort of heavier stylized look.
Yeah, and I think shooting in the way that you did, it sort of invites those kind of happy accidents to happen again that maybe don't happen on shows or movies where it's very VFX driven, with the pipeline kind of in the opposite direction.
I mean, that was the thing that was very different about this movie in general is, and I can't speak to the specific shooting ratio, but huge amount of flexibility for Gareth and providing him a structure in which he could shoot in every direction, not be encumbered by a large footprint in set, and have the flexibility of working without having to put his actors in a makeup chair, whether it was Alfie or Arun or any of the extras. That's the where we all joined hands and jumped to support that philosophy. So to free up the money to go to a bunch of different locations, and also to give him like this huge amount of flexibility on the day. That's what we're endeavoring to support.
Yeah. Neil, I've heard, Gareth talk on the documentaries about, having this small crew, this guerrilla style of shooting. When you have special effects, we're talking, of course, about the tangible in-camera physical effects teams arrive. Do you still come pretty mob-handed? Is there still a huge bunch of you, or did you manage to whittle that crew down to a smaller crew than usual?
We sent 2 people to Thailand, and then the rest were local crew. So, and normally I travel with 10 to 16 containers full of equipment, and we travelled with 1. It's very well loaded. We picked some stuff up on the location as well, but it was very, I briefed Jonathan Bullock, who was the on-set supervisor, of the way Gareth likes to work, and just do stuff. Put stuff in. Don't wait to be asked to do stuff. Because he will shoot it. If you rig an explosion up, Gareth will find it and film it, and then just lots of smoke.
Yeah, creating that atmosphere. And I guess a lot of what you do there on set and your team does on set, that kind of informs the look of the movie for the visual effects team as well.
Yeah, I think Neil and his team putting in all the special effects that they did, whether it be the smoke or explosions, like that gave us such a grounded, reference. And for us, it was, just adding a bit more. It wasn't completely replacing it. It was literally using that as our basis. And that's kind of, I feel like, the main theme throughout this whole project is we use a lot of whatever is already in plate photography and just either augment or, change and replace and extend things here and there. It's never a complete just we're going full visual effects. It's a mixture. It's a nice mixture of plate and CG.
One of the things that's kind of hard to do in visual effects is to have convincing explosions when you don't know what the explosions would look like on the day. It's not that we don't do it all the time. We do. But when you have an anchor that is, there's a flame pot and the tank battle sequence, for example, going off, and we know that there's one on the day, but we want to have 4 of them. Well, we know what the color temperature is. We know the dynamics of the smoke. We know we can infuse all these ideas that are already there. So it's as far as we're concerned, the more that you can do on the day, the better it is. But as long as we have something in the frame to key off of, that's really the jumping off point for us. So we get the color temperature of the smoke, the wind direction, the wind strength, how long the fire is persistent before it rolls into smoke. All of those things we're looking at as cues. It's not that we can't make those choices independently. It's just that if it's already been expressed in the frame, we know there's a reality to it, and we can recreate it.
And I think if it's expressed in... Go on, Gareth, sorry.
No, I was going to say, when I used to do visual effects, I mainly relied on Photoshop, and I did a lot of matte painting cheats, 2.5D things for VFX. And I would say predominantly the thing I was doing the most, because what you do is you basically get an image, some footage that someone shot, and you're trying to make it look better than it did. And one of the things you start doing straight away is you start cutting out layers. And then the main thing you do is you start creating what you'd call Z depth cues for those layers. And it's what lighting does on a set. It's kind of like you're looking at a 2D image, but it's telling your brain, this is far away, this is close, and that helps give you ideas of scale and all sorts. And so what you might call atmospherics or smoke is such a important part of making a cinematic image. And in a funny way, if someone said you got to go shoot another film, but you can't take a big light with you, you can either take a big light or a smoke crew. I would go for the smoke crew every time, because it's the thing that tells you instantly when you look at an image, the relationship of everything in 3-dimensional space. And your brain really enjoys seeing that, because it understands, it doesn't have to do any heavy lifting to understand it. And sort of the more easy to consume the images are, the more your brain enjoys watching them. It's sort of a weird thing to explain, but the smoke was in every single scene every day. They got really good at it by the end.
Yeah, so as much as it's important for you to have that anchor to anchor your work to, it's important for the audience, isn't it, to have that anchoring as well, because you buy it a lot easier as an audience member. I remember speaking to the crew that worked on Andor, and they were saying that, there was a shot of a dam in Wales that doubled up as an Imperial base or something, and they might have replaced 90% of that shot, but because they had something to anchor to, it helped their work, and it just helps the audience buy it all the better. I have to say, I think one of the many things I've always enjoyed about your work, Gareth, is the sense of scale that you're able to create. And I wondered if by shooting those on location plates, whether it kind of enabled you to be even bolder with scale than you would have if you'd have been creating the shot purely as a computer image.
I think the main thing is you get so inspired when you're sat with a blank canvas, and the concept artist or, VFX or whatever it is, and you've just got to start painting something. You can do the obvious thing, okay, there's a really massive monolithic sci-fi building in the distance. Okay, we know we got to do that. Here's a certain shape for that. Again, there's a foreground character. Okay, here you go. Then everything in between is well, what would that be? Is there a road? Is there a cliff edge? And it becomes really difficult to make all those details up. And whatever you actually did, when you step out into the real world, you get 10 times more ideas for free. They're just there in real life. And so every time we would shoot something that had to have VFX, which is nearly every shot, there was an excitement to, you know, if I closed my eyes and someone said, what do you think we should do here? And you would picture the shot, and then you open them and you see where you really are, and you see what the light's doing and what the weather's done and where the actor is. You suddenly go, oh, I know it'd be way better, you know, and it stops being so generic. Like, it stops being this thing because it's deep down, it was inspired by another shot from another movie, and it becomes your movie, like very unique to this moment and this situation. I'd say the hardest thing was backing off, because the thing that gives a lot of things scale is a reference to something you know the size of, and typically that's a person. And so if you're over the shoulder of someone, like if I'm over someone's shoulder and I'm trying to make something far away look big, it doesn't, because the biggest thing in the frame is their head. And so things look really big when you get like, you know, 300 meters back, and then there's this little figure in frame. But getting 300 meters back means any old tourist could walk into shot, you know. And so there was always like this thing we would do where we would shoot close up all the drama, if you want to call it that, and then we would go through all the same motions again, but on the drone. And we sort of treated our drone like a camera crane. So we had a drone crew, and it was sort of hilarious if you ever listened to the footage, because they recorded my voice. It was during COVID, so I had a mask on, and they found that they could put a little microphone in the mask and listen, like, so they could listen to what I was saying, and me trying to translate or explain, like, lower, left, no, the other left. But we would get these shots, and they were so exciting. Like, as a VFX artist in the past, I would be seeing stuff unfold and go, I would love to do this shot. Do you know what I mean? Like the way the sun is going, the way the mountains go, and you got this, like, it's like there's this beautiful little playground to imagine things inside of, and so it's sort of, people talk about the world building in our film, and I think the biggest thing we did that, strangely, as absurd as this sounds, doesn't happen on these movies, is go to the actual world to start building. Like normally you're in a studio against green, but it's like when you stand in the real world locations, there's so many clues and ideas and inspiration that you just like, it's more about taking things away than it is like, oh God, what can I put there? You know, maybe ILM will completely disagree now and contradict everything I just said.
No. It's funny that in many ways it's a travel film, and there's a series. There's so many one-offs, and the one-offs are a mixed bag for visual effects because it's a huge amount of work for one shot, right? There's no efficiency of scale there. But it also does this amazing thing for the audience where you just keep on seeing new, novel perspectives of this world, and it's informing your world in a way that it's not like, you know, I think a lot of films are organized, and this is not a cut for them. It is dialogue, set piece, and basically a playground, right? And so you see a lot of different views of basically one environment. And Gareth's movie is traveling through these environments, and there's always like sort of these really enjoyable one-offs where you see enough of them, and then your head just sort of explodes with the idea of what this world is. And if there's any magic trick that we're doing, is we're taking advantage of the fact that we've shown you so many interesting one-off views of this world. Some that you don't even understand what they are. And there's a shot that I'm reminded of where Joshua's traveling on the bus, where there's this enormous sort of forms, like the triangle-looking things. I still don't know exactly what they are, but it's really cool looking. And then you're off it, not explained, not part of the story and the sense of it, but you want to see more and more of that world, and there's a level of engagement that comes with that.
Yeah, and it's not just about the scale in the frame that I was talking about when I mentioned scale. It's that you feel like it is a world, you know, you feel the expanse of it. But at the same time, that scale never becomes overbearing. So you get those emotional scenes where the audience needs to lean in and feel empathy for the characters that we're learning about as we go through. And it feels to me, Gareth, that was the ethos through all of the departments. You know, it feels like the design, the production design, the acting, the characterization, all of it is important for those intimate scenes. You know, like I think in the documentary you talk about how you kind of have more of a empathic response based on the design of the face of the simulants.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, I can't agree with you because, you know, I always beat myself up that I should have done something different or better than I did it. But I would say the thing I would like to be true, whether it is or not, is that when you're making a movie, you end up talking about things so many times and you end up using similar words over and over and over. And then at the end of it, if you somehow could like, if you could basically have like a document that is a transcript of everything you said over those 2 years, I would love to think the 2 high score words are emotional and epic. Like it feels to me that was what we were always trying to do, like make it feel really epic and make it feel really emotional. And I'm not saying we did that, but they're the 2 places. I don't want to go just to one. You know what I mean? If I those are the 2 places I always think a film should try to get to, because film sort of does that better than I think a lot of the other art forms. They can achieve, like, give you goosebumps and also make you cry. You know what I mean? So it's like they're my favorite films when I was growing up. Did that.
Yeah, I think, sci-fi is quite a crowded genre, and Gareth, I think we're roughly the same age. It's very difficult to...
You're 23
have
as well.
a film... Yeah, absolutely, yeah. I just went bald very early. It's very difficult not to see nods to films that we kind of grew up with and, of course, that inspired you. But you've created this world that somehow feels familiar. It also feels new. But more importantly, it feels right to me in some way. Like some of the technology looks clunky and annoying, like the radio with the little light on it. Initially you think, why is that thing big? And then you look around you and you go, yeah, the world is full of stuff like that. Not everything is sleek and designed to perfection. That seems like something that, again, carries through the whole movie, whether it's the vehicles or the hand props or the costumes. It's not a question, it's a statement, but somebody can respond.
Well, I'll say, Jake can take this over, but basically we gave our very early brief was, imagine Apple, the iPhone didn't win the handheld tech battle, and it was won by the Sony Walkman early in the 80s, and then so it's like kind of a parallel universe in a way, where it's what the future used to be when we were growing up. And so you guys did loads of research into that as well.
Yeah. Well, first, before we get too far into it, major kudos to James Klein, our production designer, who, the movie does not work without his contributions on the design front, who was with us from the beginning to really the very end, and was always jumping in and designing. And we were, popping back and forth with him, and even to the point where, and I think this is very untraditional, this movie is untraditional in many different ways, but one of the elements that was very untraditional is we would give him rough renders, which he would do paint overs with, that would end up back in shots. There's no movie I've ever worked on where we're trying to straddle this world between art concept world and into visual effects as much as this one. But in regards to design, we're the buzzwords that we kept on hearing from James and from Gareth were product design and how things fit into other things and this negative space, and they're continually pushing in those degrees. And we had, the touchstones of the design work were, the Game Boy and the Walkman and Gareth, I don't know if I'm going to reveal too much, but the number of pieces that you had collected from eBay that you then would hodgepodge and swoosh together to turn into other on-set items. I don't know. That's a fun. I think it was just really interesting to see how that all worked out together. You're not going to volunteer the fact that you bought stuff on eBay.
Well, no, yeah, basically, it was the pandemic. I had too much time on my hands, and so I bought every single piece of tech off eBay that you could.
You were that guy bidding against me, right?
Yeah, from the 80s. And then I don't know what it was, 3 tons of eBay items went to Thailand, something like that.
Yeah. Switchers
and we would cut them in half. So you take a bit of a Sony, camera, and then you would take some old computer and basically glue them together and then blend it and create a new looking sci-fi device out of it. And it was like a poor man's way of just filling out all the props on the tables and filling out, all these environments with crazy looking weird shit that we never explain.
That's a very kind of Norman Reynolds approach.
Yeah.
Sorry, Andrew.
It was a treat walking through the art warehouse in Bangkok and seeing tables and tables of just all of this old gear and kit that the art department would attach to a backpack, or it would be some sort of a handheld device that, again, wasn't ever explained, but just became part of the tapestry of the world. You'd see people wandering around carrying things, and it really worked.
Our team at ILM had such a blast though, like putting all these, whether it be like you guys said, backpacks or TVs together. It was just, the smallest of objects, and suddenly, doing exactly what you guys did on set, practically sticking things together. Our team did the same thing. It was like, totally, I want to put this NES, purple color in here and give it a bit of that orange accent as well. And, contrasting that with the shades of gray, and that 80s vibe was very much alive throughout all of the design.
Mm. Of course, the first time I watched the movie, I just felt all of this. I didn't analyze it. On second and third viewing, I'm looking out for things and trying to spot things. In testament to all of your work, Neil, I couldn't tell whether they were real vehicles on the road and your team were controlling them, or whether they were CGI, and what was your part in the puzzle and what was the VFX part in the puzzle. What were the sort of challenges you had on set? To be in a far-flung place where maybe the movie industry doesn't necessarily go to. Did you find challenges there that were, this is to you and Gareth, did you find challenges there that really meant that you had to improvise from day to day?
I mean, it was really, like I say, we took a very minimal amount of equipment, and then we just found whatever we could there as well, and just made it work. And because also Gareth shoots 360, it was like trying to keep out a shot, or like Gareth said, we'd dress the people up so they were in shot with the smoke machines and stuff like that. So it was it's a great way of working, I have to say.
Yeah,
I mean, even though we were augmenting, huge sections, we were often keeping the windows and the views through to the interiors, but the rest of the vehicles were often complete replacements. But it's that theme of real, be it real vehicles as a base, or actual plates containing amazing information, or real props that inspired our artists. We're totally up for this. It's give us that over a green screen, and to Charmain's point, that lit up our crews, people who weren't on this project wanted to be.
The thing that Gareth had, and still I'm a little bit mystified that we pulled it off, is he had faith that we would sort of figure it out, and made these really big swings, Sprinter vans on set, which would going to be deleted and, remove the engine bays, or the same for the ambulance, or, half a dozen of other vehicles. And then I was trying to working with James to try to find which parts were absolutely necessary to hold on to get that to work, that sort of puzzle. We had a lot of those. That's sort of a thread through the entire movie, is making these really ambitious asks after it's been shot, and having the confidence that we could sort of figure it out. And it was lucky for us that we had such an amazing paint team, an amazing tracking team, an amazing compositing lighting teams that were able to sort of contribute. We had to fight people to get them off the show. I mean, it's very rare that you have a project where the visual effects artist team is so engaged that they'll spend more time than they're necessarily assigned to work on it. So it was a rare treat in that regard.
Yeah, I guess you're all in the industry you want to be challenged, you want to push on to the next level, you don't want to be wallowing, doing things in the same way. Do you think that the way this movie was created will change people's minds on how a movie can be made?
They have the information. I don't know if they'll pick up the baton. I mean, I just, if I'm honest,
That's it. I mean, a key ingredient, and I think we feel this, at least ILM side, is Gareth in the equation. The fact he can size up a shot with a knowledge in his mind of how that could come together, how that needs to come together, and then communicate it really, clearly, efficiently with us downstream, makes the world of difference. I mean, I think other filmmakers could pick up a similar style, but it's partnerships. If perhaps they're less VFX savvy, but want to take the same approach, it's making sure that they have VFX core in their team, so we can kind of pick up any slack and make sure we're having those discussions and can feed into some of those early decisions. So yes, I think it can be done, but I mean, Gareth was
it's going to speak at the DGA and do.
You're all signed up for the next Gareth movie, then, right? Yeah,
we're signed up.
That's an easy one.
Yeah.
It's Scooby-Doo 5.
This is what I was going to say to you, Gareth. I look at the film and I can see the kind of influences that you and I have grown up with, and I can also see aspects of Monsters in there, and I can see aspects of Rogue One in there, and I can see the scale of the Godzilla movie. What's next? Is it a musical? Where are you going to go? Are you going to go completely off piste?
Yeah, it's a rom-com black and white musical, so it wins awards.
Okay, looking forward to that one. I just wanted to go back briefly to talk about the way in which you shot this, because as I said, I was talking to Phil Tippett earlier, and I was talking about how much planning he does in his work, and he says sometimes I just build the armature of the thing, I build the miniature around it, and I just set about animating, and I've got an intention, but if suddenly I think actually this character should do this, I've got that ability as director and animator to take it in any direction I want to go. And it seems to me that you have that same kind of approach, in that you allow yourself enough room to improvise. People talk about that flow state, don't they, that sports people get when they're driving, a racing driver around a racing circuit. Ayrton Senna famously talked about it, or Phil Tippett was talking about being in the zone. Is your zone, Gareth, like behind that viewfinder?
Yeah, I can relate to that in the sense that, so there's, what I thought the way you would make a film was when you were young is what you did is you sort of got pen and paper and you start storyboarding, and you close your eyes, you try and picture what would be really cool shots. And then you basically show that to everybody and they go, got it. And then you, one at a time, just go and get those shots and put it together. And that's kind of how some films are made, and partly made. And I found that when I made my first film, I had to throw that whole idea out the window, because we had so little money that if I started trying to say, no, it has to be this car going this way against this thing, suddenly that would cost us 10 grand to organize, Instead, it was like, okay, let's just flag a car down on the side of the street that looks cool, and let's see if we can talk them into being in a film for an hour, and things like that. And so that then teaches you, because you get in the back of that car, you go down some of the road that you weren't picturing, and obviously when you see things worse than you were picturing, you go, no, keep going, no. And then suddenly you'll see something better than you were picturing, or more interesting or unique than you were picturing. And you go, wait, stop. Oh, cool, okay. And you start like chucking the ingredients in front of camera. And again, you need to have a plan slightly, because the crew or everyone that's trying to help you, they just want to know what do we need to do, right? So like by having storyboards sometimes, or concept art, or long conversations, planning things, it allows everyone to go, okay, we need these ingredients nearby, and we need to chuck them in front of the lens like this. And then when they're chaotically going in front of the lens, that's when you get excited, because you go, okay, it's not quite... I always feel really bad. I think my worst moments are when I've blocked a scene and it's too staged and it feels fake. You know what I mean? It feels like actors have been told to stand there and look at that thing. And I always come away from those situations, or in the edit suite, look at them and go, oh God, it just feels like a movie too much. And when you have, things where it's a little bit out of control, it always feels more realistic. And I think in a science fiction film, anything that can add a layer of, because basically you go, how do we make this more realistic? And ILM might tell you, oh, we set the renders to this, and we have extra texturing on there. And I think that's worth maybe 3% of the realism effect on the audience. but probably worth 50% and gets you way more of a win really fast is having naturalistic behavior and having a real location and real lighting. And so like that's always what you're looking for. And it's the filmmaking is a fine line, constant like knife's edge between, if you go so totally real, it's boring. Real life is quite boring. You know what I mean? If it's security camera footage that no one ever wants to watch, right? But if you're totally contrived, it might be stunning and exciting, but you never believe it for a second. And so you're trying to dance between those two worlds. And what made this film so exciting for me is, they can't be robots because we don't have them in the world. We don't have flying cars. We don't have spaceships. But if we can shoot something in a really organic, naturalistic way, where you're just so confused watching it going, but hang on, how did they do this? And if you're familiar with filmmaking, you start to go, wait, like some of my favorite shots are things like where Alfie, the little AI robot kid, is just chatting with the other kids in a village in like Cambodia. Yeah. And they're just laughing and joking with each other. And on a normal movie, that would be contrived. All those kids would be child actors, and it would cost, and they'd all be dressed up in costume, and it would feel really false. But we really went to a village in Cambodia, and we really had Madeline hang out with those kids and shot it without any like direction. Do you know what I mean? Just let them interact, and then we cherry picked the nice moments for the scene and stuff like that. And I love the fact that I've got ILM at the other end of that, you know, and the other visual effects teams that worked on the movie. But it's like knowing I was able to do a triple backflip because I knew that if I fell, or, you know, the ILM there's this amazing safety net to catch me. And so it just made you more and more ambitious and more annoying to them because they kept succeeding. So it was like, okay, let's try and make them fail. Let's try this instead next time.
The next one's going to be brutal.
It was a treat observing how organic Gareth was on set.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed just watching that, and then, you know, tried to see, okay, what can I capture from that? But whether it was that moment when Madeline was chatting with the kids, and then there were some dogs that were running down the pathway, and some of the set PAs wanted to shoo them off, and Gareth was like, no, just let them through.
There would be dogs, yeah.
And so whether it was dogs or chicken or just or there was another conversation moment when some storm clouds started to roll in, and so people started covering things up, and we're thinking, okay, well, we're going to shut down for a while, and Gareth just kept on rolling, and this was a conversation between Ken Watanabe and a couple of the other insurgents where they were talking about, does the child know what she's intended for? And just that was a beautiful moment to observe, where we just kept going, and this sort of light shower just went through, but it actually created some really interesting lighting. And I really enjoyed just seeing that, how Gareth just adapts, and he's more of a yes and. Let's just see where we're at and go with it, rather than trying to control the environment.
I'll take full credit for that. But what really happened is I went up to the producers and went, "It's about to be a storm. Can we film this tomorrow?" And they're like, "Nope."
But that's a great thing, right? You just capture the world the way it is. And especially because this is supposed to be, you know, a sci-fi futuristic robot film, we didn't have robots, like you said. We didn't have simulants. We just had these amazing people in the village who were not even actors acting. And they were just doing their usual normal selves. And, you know, you specifically not telling them that they're going to be made into a robot, or, you know, putting someone in a tracksuit, I think made all the difference, because they could just be themselves. And that allowed us to then go post.
You would never cast the woman who's going up the pathway in Nepal with the child as a robot, if she was going to have to show up
with the wide stance and the waddle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. If she was going to show up, she's not showing up in a casting session. You're never going to put her in gray pajamas. And that kind of thing is, I mean, that's kind of thing that carries the day, like the naturalism of that moment, and makes it sort of the specialness of the movie in many different ways of just how you do this.
I mean, these guys have all talked about how they were out of their comfort zone on the film, and I was too. Like, for instance, when that storm came in, I so didn't want to film it. Like, I really was. This is such an important scene. We can't have all these rain coming down, and it's not how I pictured it. And And everyone was like, we haven't got a choice. You know what I mean? These people go home tomorrow and blah, 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 blah. You have to do it tonight. And the sun was setting. We had about an hour or something. And so it was like clearly going to be a one take wonder. Like we got to do the whole scene in one take and just move around and find different angles and things like this. And I remember doing it as if I'd been stabbed in the stomach. Like I was just so annoyed with myself and trying not to let it show in my interactions with people. But I was gutted because I'd been dreaming about this because of the pandemic. You had an extra year and a half to dream about every scene in this film.
Yeah.
And I was like, it's just not how I was picturing it. I was so annoyed with myself. And it ended, and I remember going up to Kiri Hart, who was the producer on the film, and she was walking away from Video Village, and I was ready with a bunch of excuses to go, I'm so sorry, we'll do it again, blah, blah, blah. And she looked like tearful, and she went, that was amazing. Wow. And I was like, what? And she goes, that was the best scene that we've done. And I was like, you're kidding me? You know, and it's like, and then you realize being forced out of your comfort zone is a really good thing. You go kicking and screaming, but you tend to do your best work when you're really not like ready or happy. Like when you, because a filmmaker can very easily start to create walls and barriers and go, and like, I want these people to tell those other people to go away. And I want everyone to, you know, like you can make life easy for yourself. And then your films, I think, don't get quite as interesting. And so like with visual effects, like getting out of the comfort zone, getting a bit panicked, having some sleepless nights.
Yeah.
You always come...
On paper, this movie doesn't work for visual effects, if I'm completely candid. Like if you list out all the assets, if you list out all of the shots, if you list out all of the effect simulation, the number that comes back is way more than I think we had to spend. But it's the fact that we started from a place of, okay, well, we know that we had sort of a common pot of money, and our goal was to sort of elevate everything up. And Gareth is helping us drive what things are sort of hot and what things are colder, and where we can cheat and where we can not cheat, and techniques for, well, we're only going to see this from one perspective, so we only just need it as a flat piece of art, or this thing is a lot more important, so we need to make sure we put more time into that. That's not how traditionally movies are made. Movies are made that everything is sort of on paper, has an equal weighting in terms of budget. If you're asked to build a robot that's a certain dollar, if you have 5 of them, that is the same price times 5. No, we're not doing that. We're going to basically say, all right, we'll make one common body. We'll make 7 different heads. We'll do multiple paint schemes for the heads. Then we'll send when Gareth wants a couple of other robots, well, what we'll do is we'll turn off, Charmain, you remember this? Let's turn on a lens or turn off a lens. You know, things like that. We're in this world where we're trying to elevate and find lots of cheats. And I think that's just really refreshing for visual effects to be part of that game, because I think that's something that exists in the production is like on set a lot. You know, if you don't have the crane for that day, then maybe you're on a ladder. If you don't have the dolly, then maybe you're on a rickshaw. If you don't, you know, there's always sort of a secondary backup plan. And that's not something that we typically do in visual effects. And it's something that I really loved about the project, is that we were trying to find places where we're doing that. Charmain, maybe you want to speak about sort of our 2D robots. Like we had backups for our backups.
Yeah, one of our comp supervisors, Juan Enriquez, he made this amazing setup in Nuke where we can literally track the people and render out based off of our robot kit straight out of Nuke. So we didn't have to go through the whole process of, you know, creating its own bespoke model and then, you know, rigging it, animating it. You know, it was all done in 2D. And so we were able to hit so many of our background and mid-ground robots that way without needing to go through the whole pipe. So it was all about just finding quicker ways to be more efficient. And, you know, we should be always aiming to do that. It's not, you know, it shouldn't be a budget-led thing. It should be just something that, you know, is the right moment to use the right technology.
There was when growing up and getting Cinefex and things like that, which obviously I love, is that you'd feel this competition between companies that do visual effects kind of bragging about how much effort they've put into each shot. And it was like this arms race of effort, you know, and proprietary software was like one of the key words, right? Like something no one else has. You got to come here for that. And there's this whole brag about how much effort has been put in. And I think better thing to applaud is how little effort went into a shot, you know, because if you can make someone believe that truly happened, that fantastical event happened, and you did it very quickly and easily, that's actually a harder task than just throwing 1 million resources at it, you know?
Yeah.
And so like what we were trying to do a lot was be clever, do minimum effort. Do you know what I mean? Like there's this whole theory of if you approach every shot as with minimum effort possible, you've still got loads of resources left for the ones that failed. You can then actually go the extra mile. But if you approach everything as maximum effort, about a third of the way through the movie, you're like, we're done, we're spent, I'm really sorry, that's the end of it. And so I think that mindset, like flipping that round, was like super helpful.
Because I get the sense that, well, you could tell me, at what point did you say, right, that's the shot, we're locking that down as a shot, and that's going to the VFX team now to work on? Because I get the feeling you're not the kind of director who's going to say, dear ILM, please build me a entire 3D town or city because I'm not sure where I'm going yet. You're specifically saying, I want this shot augmented, or, you know.
What's the opposite of that? Is there an opposite of that, Guy?
An idiot.
No, I don't think you're an idiot.
What would happen is we'd have, you know, you got basically filmmaking is a bunch of deadlines, right? You're not sitting there going, oh, maybe we'll do this, maybe we'll do that forever and ever. It's financial. Someone spent a lot of money. They need their money back by this date. You know, that's how long you've got. And you work backwards from those deadlines, and I've got to feed ILM X number of shots a week for them to complete the film on time. And so what tends to happen is you're never comfortable doing it, but it's like you got to turn over 50 shots on Friday. And it's like, oh my God, I don't even know 5. You know what I mean? And so you basically have to sit and watch the film, the cut you have, and go, okay, what do I feel most confident about? And you'd always go through and try and get it down. You eventually find 50, and then you'd have to go through and check the takes with all the best ones, because they can't, if you change the take, that's like, they've got to redo the whole thing. And so a lot of your time in post-production is doing that kind of thing. I'd say a third of it is that, a third is actually editing, and a third is then giving feedback on visual effects and things. It's all consuming. And like one day I'll do a little drama that doesn't involve any CG, anything. And it'll be this like beautiful thing where it's like, no, wait, let's just pretend. Let's just pretend.
I noticed that you got, you know, there's a bunch of awards. We're in the awards season here. But there's nominations going on. How important is it to you to get that recognition in terms of like a personal win, but also to kind of feel that you've done something new and you've done something different?
That was not for me. That was for Gareth.
Go on, Ian.
That was for Gareth. Or Ian, take it. You can take that one.
Am I going for it? I mean, yeah. I mean, absolutely. On a personal level, it's a thrill and then some. But I think knowing what the team did, and that's, you know, Global ILM and the other partners outside of ILM who contributed visual effects for this movie, you know, everyone truly poured their hearts into it. You know, led by the vision that they could see in the plates from the outset. So I think to stand up and represent that amazing team, yeah, that's the biggest bit.
Nice. Well, I'm going to call it a day here, guys, because we've done nearly an hour. But I just want to say thank you for your work. I love the movie. I genuinely think it's this generation's Blade Runner. I think people are going to be revisiting this film for another 40, 50 years and seeing the influence it's had on films that came afterwards. And I think a round of applause to all of you.
That's more important than the awards. I mean, honestly, to me, that's the most exciting part of it. Yeah, the awards come and go, but you like the awards?
Yeah, I'll take the awards.
You need a background there, Gareth.
Can we do both? I'll meet you in 40 years with them, and you can tell me when people finally like the movie.
Oh, that's so funny.
And like Ridley, you're not going to be making small, intimate movies. You're going to be still making these huge epics, Gareth, I'm sure.
I don't know. It's a weird thing because it is like you do go on a journey when you make a film, especially towards the end when things don't, you know, we had an actor strike when this movie came out and we couldn't even have a premiere with the actors, a big celebration. It was very strange and they couldn't do any press. And so there's this, you start to then go, why we do it? Like, why do you make a film? Like, because it's so hard. It's 2.5 years of absolute marathon, like where you do nothing but the movie. And you go, why did we do this? Why did we do this? And I think out of all the possible reasons the one you mentioned, i.e. that when you're an old man, people still come up to you and talk about the film and an influence it had on them in some way, and you contributed to that cycle of filmmaking and inspiration that, you know, got you going. That's probably the ultimate accolade. We'll see in 40 years if you're right, but that's probably the best award you could get.
I think that's a very nice line to end on.
No, let's not joke. It's the second best award you can get. The Oscar is way better.
All right, that was even better.
Yeah.
Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with the team from The Creator there. I'm very pleased to see that their work is getting that recognition that we talked about at the end there. Fingers firmly crossed for that Oscar. Thanks to Gareth, Charmain, Jay, Andrew, Ian and Neil and the folks at ILM for setting this up, particularly Ian. Thank you, Ian. Ian's been looking after me for a while. Something else he's lined up for me in recent times I'll tell you about in a moment. Now, I often say this is a small podcast. It really is just me and my laptop and a guest, or as you saw or heard, multiple guests. This is not a side hustle, this is work, and it really doesn't earn me the sort of money for the amount of work and effort that it takes to make these episodes. From booking guests to research, interviewing, editing, social media, it all takes time. But you know what? I love it, and I love the fact that some of you have supported me from the start, and your support via Patreon is so important to me. There's currently 109 of you, I think, supporting the podcast, so that's about 7% of the people that listen regularly. And I know there are plenty of you listening because I get those stats. So if you do enjoy my work and you'd like it to continue, please think about pledging just $12 for the entire year. Not per month, for the entire year. And for that, you'll help the production of at least 24 episodes, at least 2 a month. $12 is what, 2 coffees? Maybe 2 beers in New York or London? But it would really mean a lot to me. If you can't do that, please go and review it, leave a comment, subscribe, tell your friends in the industry. I know a lot of people, I think my biggest listenership is still in Los Angeles actually, but there's people in Germany, Denmark, Japan, Holland, France, Canada. So if I could get that kind of percentage up, say 15-20% of you who listen could contribute that $12 a year, then that would be amazing, because I'd actually be able to say no to other freelance work and focus my attention on the podcast. I'd love to be able to do 3 episodes a month or 4 episodes a month, because I love doing this work. Coming up on the podcast, we have the return of my buddy Giles Torreira, actor, director, writer, and just brilliant person. Spent the day with him actually in Brighton this week. We went down there to see an event that was run by another friend, Wayne Imms, in which he was interviewing Peter Sushitsky, the Empire Strikes Back DOP. And of course, he worked with Cronenberg and he worked with Polanski. I'm hoping to get him on the podcast. Wayne is going to introduce me. So fingers crossed on that. But yeah, Giles is back for this. He was my second episode of this podcast, but he's back because we sat together in his apartment in London, his little flat there, and we did a movie commentary on our favourite movie. See if you can guess which film it is. It's probably Star Wars. And then I spoke to helicopter stunt pilot Fred North about his great new book that's out, and we had a really nice chat actually, really good guy. And I've just interviewed someone who's been a hero of mine since I was 5-6 years old, animator, director, frankly genius, Phil Tippett. Phil Tippett on this little podcast. I don't know how I've managed to get from no episodes to Phil Tippett in a matter of a couple of years. Or is it 3 years now coming up? Though you'll have to wait for that particular episode until April, because that's going to be my 100th episode. I wanted a big guest for that episode, and I've chosen that interview with Phil. We did have some technical difficulties, but yeah, all salvaged, thankfully. There was about a day there where I thought, oh no, the interview isn't complete, but no, all good. So that should be coming out in April. So please, if you can, join the Patreon, patreon.com/Jamie Benning. Subscribe on YouTube or on the podcast itself, on whatever app you use. Check out the YouTube channel and just please spread the word. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you can do so again for the next episode of the Filmumentaries podcast.
We are being